Let me show you kind of how we're going to give you this information. So the next slide shows you our, here is the order of the meeting today. So I feel like I need to give some, how did this come about? How did this come about? How did we get this opportunity? And then what was learned up front from me that made me curious enough to share and invite Ryan into it first, and then to invite the rest of the leadership team into it. What did that process of discernment and approval look like over the last 4 months, and why did it need to happen that way? What we learned along the way through that process, and maybe what I'm going to let Ryan share about what assessment he made of this process and of Virginia Hills and all of that. Then what you all probably want to know more about, which is building plans, like what does this building look like inside? What will be a part of it? What will we have access to? All of that. What's the timeline for it? And what is Virginia Hills' vision for this space? And then we're going to talk a little bit about our vision. How does that align? How how might we question whether it does? So that's also a part of it. What's the potential up ahead? And then the top things that we think we need to tell you or clarify that will help, that we think you have to know what we know about this to make this decision. And then Q&A. You can ask all your questions after that. Maybe we will have answered every question you have. It's also possible that you have questions that we have no answers to because we're only just beginning this, right? But we'll let you know that. And then say a few last things based on your questions, and then we will vote. And the way I said that we'll vote is I'll send a text to everybody who's in the congregation. It's the easiest way for me to get the link out, and then immediately y'all can click the button, vote in real time. It's anonymous this time. What I said earlier in the service, if you came in late, was the vote on the lease that would happen next year cannot be anonymous. It has to have names on it. It has to have member names on it because it will include like a real charge conference where the DS comes and all of that. But this is your opportunity. This is our opportunity to get a gauge of the congregation as a whole without you feeling like you can't be honest about how you feel, or people will know. Yeah. So let's begin. If we think back to October, November of 2023, we had been presented this lovely opportunity of over at Olivet. We were approached by Olivet Church to maybe rent space there, and as that process went on, we realized that was probably not going to be a good location. At that point in time, there were questions that were unanswered. There were some concerns by the district about that location and all that. So we realized that it was starting to maybe not happen. And the very day that the location and building committee, it's a district committee from the UMC, denied our request to be there. That very same day, that morning at 8 a.m., I had coffee with a woman named Janine Purdy. She had reached out to me through text, which tells me that she had my cell phone. Which tells me that somebody I know knows her. I know who that is. So it's Matt, apparently, but she texted me directly, and I was like, oh, hey. And then at that point, I had no bandwidth to have a conversation with a random woman texting me, except that she then said, I want to talk to you a little bit about Virginia Hills. And I went, is that new church that's being built on Telegraph? I had passed by it many times. You can see that, the picture. I don't know if you all have passed by it. Something that looked like that. And for months, before it even had any buildings on it, it was just dirt. And I had a two-year-old who loves excavators and dirt, right? So you could not, I don't think you can ignore it anyways, but if you had a toddler in the car, you could not ignore it. And so she just asked me overnight, what is that, Mommy? What's that? And then at first there was a sign that said, Virginia Hills Baptist Church, a new kind of faith community, or a new kind of Baptist community. And I was like, is there a new Baptist church building a building in this area? That land is expensive. I know that. And I didn't know the name. I was like, that's crazy. I mean, who builds a building? Who's building a building these days? That's great. I would love to know more about that, but I didn't know more. And then randomly I get a text message from Janine who shares, I'm from Virginia Hills. I want to tell you about that. So I just went on this coffee date completely thinking, I'm just curious about this building. by the end of the coffee date, I called Brett and said, I think we were just offered another building. And it was bewildering. I mean, just like also feeling very much like only, like it's gotta be God, but also like, I don't know whether we're gonna be approved later today or not, but I think we're just offered another building. So after our original request with the location committee was denied, and since I will actually say, Ryan and I we've met with Franconia recently and we had a meeting with Franconia pastor and their lay leader, and felt like that went really well, right? That went really well, and we're at a place where we understand each other, and I think we're also at a place where we're like, that wasn't the right thing. That really was not. And so, but moving months forward, I needed to figure out like, okay, so we were denied. Let me reach back out to Janine and see if she was serious about this, because that was just a coffee date. So reached back out, tried to see, could we get together? Told Ryan, like, if I were to get us like a night, like it's December, but I feel like if we wait till the new year, it's too long. I don't know what the timeline is, but if I just had Christmas dinner like at my house, and I invited this couple, Bart and Janine Purdy over, would you be able to come? And we can just kind of get a gauge. Because you don't know if somebody offers you something, but you don't know how serious it is. And it's such a gift. And so we started off by having a dinner at my house, and we got to know them informally, but also knowing in this, like, why we were there, like to have that conversation. So I wanted to, and I will say a few things that I learned in the very beginning about Virginia Hills that what did intrigue me was first that she had done her research on us. She knew about us. Also, she knew somebody, Matt. They served together someplace. But she had done her research, and she knew we met at Hayfield. She knew that we were. She didn't know the details of like that we were looking for a building. She didn't know all that, that all that had happened just months before. But she knew that we were mobile, and that must be hard, and that we may be wanting to there might be a new stage ahead. She also knew that we hosted worship at Knowles, and that was the thing she mentioned from the very beginning of like, man, we just are so impressed by what you all do in community with Knowles, how you bring worship into public spaces. She also told a story of how it got to this point that was incredibly impressive. She said that they are a church that was built in 1959, and they have only had two pastors for the entire amount of time, two pastors. Both pastors, the first one served about 35 years. This pastor serves in lower 30s. They both have served for over 30 years pastoring this church. And the original pastor had a love for baseball, and so had these baseball fields built on property. Tons of grassy area, baseball fields. They would have softball games and all that, and they used to be really fruitful. But as time went on, the congregation declined and grew older. And one thing that did grow while they were growing older in congregation was a preschool on property grew and grew to become one of the top preschools in the area. Like it's just known to be one of the great preschools in the kind of Kingstowne, Hayfield area, Virginia Hills preschool. And so there's this budding preschool, there's this aging building, and somebody about a decade ago, some woman named Grace said, we don't do anything with those. And he said that she was like 90 at this point. She has since passed. But she said, we don't do anything with those fields anymore. And y'all are talking about a declining building. Have you ever thought about just selling this land? And come a decade later, they ended up selling 5 acres of the 7 acres on property to an assisted living community called Brightview, which you might have seen that sign be added on that road a little later. So it was just Virginia Hills, and then it said Brightview Assisted Living Retirement Community. They sold 5 of 7 acres and received $5 million for it to build a brand new building on their property, fully paid for building. That was approved pre-COVID. So you can imagine it's been delayed. So it was like over a decade ago that woman made had that crazy idea. She won't even get to see the building be built, but they fast forward past delay in COVID, the building that's being built now is slightly more expensive than it would have been had it been built in 2020. And we can talk about that too. But it's incredible that a church in decline decided to sell land in an intentional way in partnership with an assisted living facility that's coming on their property. Then they will have a place within that property almost at the front of the property, but almost a part of it. And they can meet the needs of that assisted living facility. And this is actually what Brightview does. So Brightview has created an entire way of growth through communicating with aging congregations that want to sell significant land in communities where senior living is hard to find, and they then fund the building of a new building within the property. So that's when I heard that over coffee with Janine, heard the whole story, because I'm thinking, what kind of church has enough money to build a brand new building these days? I just couldn't imagine. That's how that happened. That's how that came about. So I'm intrigued by the church's kind of boldness to do something like that, their willingness to stick through it for a decade to get it done. That they're asking us and they know about us, and they know about our the way we collaborate. And then I'm also just, she articulated a vision of like a community center kind of space that sounded intriguing enough to go, we need to pursue this. So I'm gonna have Ryan take over to tell you what happened after that meeting.
All right, I think if we could go forward a couple slides. Okay, so this is definitely a really exciting opportunity. What started out as intriguing, every time that we had a good discussion with them or some kind of interaction, it became more and more exciting for basically all of us involved so far. Michelle kind of highlighted some of the steps along the way. One of the things that's really important to note here is that process matters. We did learn that when we were evaluating the other opportunity or having it evaluated for us by others. And one of the reasons we've taken longer to have a meeting like this is to get the steps in the process right in the right order. We also figured very quickly that this was good enough to take time to have it develop. And so that meant starting with that meal with the pastor and his wife, and then having conversations as the leadership committee, and then letting them take the next step and having their church talk about what their future should be and whether or not they as a congregation wanted to interact with us and kind of build this relationship over time specifically. That was a little weird not to be talking about it here, but to have them talking about it very publicly. So appreciate your grace there. But that allowed us to then work with that location and building community in a really substantive way. That meant letting them know what we were thinking about, getting their feedback, and they've learned a lot actually about how to interact in moments like this too. And one of the big things that they did was convene 5 United Methodist churches around this area to talk about this opportunity, which is something they haven't done in a while. They got everybody together from those other churches, talked about what this might mean for Kingstowne, talked about what it might mean for Virginia Hills, and heard from those different congregations what mattered to them and what they thought. And I think this is one of those things we really should give the district credit for, is they built a pretty strong community between those churches just with that one meeting that they held. And coming out of that meeting, all they told us was, it was a good meeting. What we learned about after the fact from everybody involved is they all felt empowered to help us make this opportunity stronger, and they felt like they had a say in their broader community. So a good job on the district's behalf working with that community. So when we did come back to that committee, a little bit wondering how it was going to go, we had a very fruitful discussion, and all of their conversation, their questions were about specific details that will need to be worked out by this fall. It was not about the substance of this opportunity, which was really good too. So as the leadership committee, we've started to feel like we've got partners out in the community in other United Methodist churches and at the district to try and make this opportunity work well. Because I think everyone sees it in some respects like an experiment, but one worth moving forward with. And so the committee did just approve us, and literally the next day Michelle sent out the letter that you all got to read. So there was this sort of process unfolding has been really strong, and I think just assessing that was good for the broader community, but there's an acknowledgement along the way of a couple key ideas that Michelle teased earlier, and that is that Virginia Hill's vision is one of being an extroverted congregation that outwardly engages with the community, meets the community where they are, and invites them into their specific space. They are not building this building so that it can be a sanctuary just for them. It is very much supposed to be a community space. And does that sound familiar? That's the kind of place that it instantly sounded like something that we might be interested in. I think the second sentence out of their mouth was how affirming and inclusive they believe they need to be as a congregation as well. And they were looking for partners who would be emblematic of those values. And that, knowing that how important that would be to this congregation, I think it was one of the first things we talked about. That's also led them to make some changes we'll talk about in just a second in how they outwardly interact with the community and some of their branding as a congregation. And that part about the preschool and the assisted living is very important, because their vision is also one of being an intergenerational mission that connects with kids when they are very young and can connect with people when they are, they have a lot to give back to their community in retirement. And they also realized that they needed some reinforcement in the middle, and that's where they saw a great complement with us. So.
Yeah.
I think we can maybe talk a little bit about the building itself.
Yeah, we can
and
talk
then
about the building
quickly,
itself
and then we can get on to just a couple other things about what we've learned along the way.
So this is the main floor of the building. This right here is the main sanctuary, and it is built like a community theater. So there are no windows in the space, particularly because they would like a real community theater, much like if you know Aldersgate United Methodist, they have ACT that is out of their church. It partnered with Aldersgate a long time in the past, but it is a community theater opportunity for teens and adults and whoever wants to be a part of singing and acting and all that to come and audition, and they have the lights and all that, and there's shows that happen. So this is they're looking towards that direction. They also have people in their congregation who are connected in that world a little bit and also have a deep passion for it. So they built it in that way. It has about 160 seats in that space, which I think is a good amount of seats. That includes a significant, I think it's like 30 or 40 of them are where wheelchairs can roll up because of the location. They are right there at Brightview, and they hope to be, this is why Brightview does this partnership, they hope to be the worshiping space for the people who live there. You also have on this level 4 children's classrooms here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have let's see. Okay, so this is also here the stage, and then there's a wall, like a freestanding wall, and then behind it is where actors and actresses can come out. So it's like a space where, I don't know if that makes sense. Brett, you can help me if you have better explanation of that. But there's a freestanding, it's just backstage. And so back here, there would be all kinds of storage, and that's where they imagine that storage for us would exist back here. But then let's show the second floor, that'll help us. So then the second floor, this is open air. So where that big X is, it's that's the height of the theater that was there before. So it's just open ceiling, open air.
Double height.
Huh? Yes, it's double house. So there's a separate space it's gonna be like a library, a chapel. You could have other worship services there. So if you were they're thinking smaller, intimate weddings and things, then they have offices and bathrooms and then 4 more classrooms. So there's 8 total children's classrooms for the preschool. And I go back to the first one. This is a multi-purpose room and then the other one over there is like fellowship hall and kitchen. That's what that is. So that's fellowship hall, kitchen, and then this is a multi-purpose room. They're thinking youth room, but it's also like they're thinking after school program, because after school care is so hard to come by in this area that that's one of the reasons why they're moving into an idea of their name changing from Virginia Hills Baptist Church and Preschool to Virginia Hills Church and Learning Center, because they would love to see some adult learning happening here, maybe some ESL, maybe some, but aftercare for students as well that are elementary age and all. And this opens, those doors open up on those sides, so when parents pull up to drop off their kids to the preschool, it'd be over here. On this side over here, these are open doors that open up to a little bit of a green space. So if you think reception hall, you have some doors that open wide. And this reception hall, that's right, this is an accordion door, so you can have two separate rooms going here at the same time. It's quite a large space. One of my questions when I saw the building was, why so big? And I mean, I did. I asked that because I'm going to get to a point where I tell you that they realize that they have more money that they have to raise now because of the increase in the amount of this project throughout COVID. And so I thought to myself, why couldn't you have reassessed and just taken some of this space out, right, before you built the building? And they said they considered that they had done 7-8 years worth of work with. And this had been approved many years before, and they had an architect that they would end up spending so much money to get a new architect to redesign this entire space that it would not be worth the amount that they need to raise now. It'd end up being about the same. So that's good for us to know. I think the building is well designed for multi-purpose. You can tell that everything's movable. Everything is made in a way where multiple groups can use each room and function well in them. And then I'll show the last picture. Oh, I can do this myself. Nope, yep, there you go. And then this is a view of Bright View next to the church. And the church is at the front of the property. Bright View is at the back. So this, what you can't see this is Telegraph right here. This would be the main entrance into. It would come to the left of the church. This is a parking lot here that is this half of it. This half belongs to the church. This quarter belongs to Brightview, and then this is shared space for anything that's needed beyond that. And there will be communication related to parking for big funerals, things like that. We can let them know, and it's more of Virginia Hills' concern than mine. I think that Easter, things like that, those are the big questions, right, about parking. And that's to come. It backs up, the back of Franconia District Park backs up right next to it. And so there are some conversations about communication with the city to have an extra lot that people could park in on big days. All right, so then the timeline. It should be Virginia Hills breaks ground on construction. The last news from Brightview, Brightview's construction company, was that they would have the slab laid by the end of April. That's the last update. So I think the location, when I drive by it, I just drove by it yesterday, looks like there's some big trailer kind of things, or so those are still left to be moved, could be into May, a little bit into May. And then Virginia Hills also is continuing. They started a capital campaign. They didn't anticipate that they would, but it's to raise about the amount of less than my mortgage. So when you think of it that way, to this area, it's not all that much. You have to think they got a mortgage for the amount, and they didn't end up raising it. They get a loan. They didn't anticipate they were going to get a loan. They probably now will have to get a loan, but it's a loan for less than a house, a townhome is in this area, right? So it's not huge, and they know they'll need to do it. This week, they needed a letter of intent to rent. so that they could go and apply for that loan. And so I had to write like a generic intending to rent at about this amount maybe, so that they could take that to the bank, so that they could try to get this loan. The winter, and maybe even fall, I don't know this whole time frame, but it'll be based on the trajectory of the building being built. We'll write and negotiate and gain approval from the UMC and the Kingstowne congregation on a formal lease agreement with them, and then continue to work out all those other details on move-in and space sharing and all of that. And then this whole time over a year would be working on how we will fill the building with the supplies it needs. So think of that. Virginia Hills has nothing of their own. They had a building full of very old things, and they were moving into a rental space. They're not going to store all of that for an undetermined amount of time. They instead just sold it all. Because they know they're going to come back to a time where they're going to have to fill a building again. But they don't have anywhere to put all this stuff, all the old furniture they had, and all of so they don't really have anything. They are renting space from Mount Vernon United Methodist Church, and they're learning really well what it's like to be an entity that rents from another, which I find that really encouraging in this process. They're having to bend and understand what it's like to give space for another to be in a space. You know, they know that world now. But at a certain point, if we're in partnership, we will be helping them in this whole realm of, I'm looking out on every list of every Methodist church that's closing. Like, do they have tables? Do they have preschool tables? Do they have, office desks? Do they have desks? Do they have chairs? We want to do a lot of this from just used, so that we can cut the cost as time goes on. And then also building partners. Who else will be in the building with us? We would be in collaboration with Virginia Hills to help them think through that and all that. And then spring of 2025, be completion of construction, and then we would move in and figure out a time where we could celebrate all of this together and also build our own community there, like our own worship there, and how we will do ministry in and out of that building, each of us individually, but also together. So Ryan can talk a little bit about their vision and our vision and what we see about it.
All right, I know we want to get to the Q&A, so we're going to go through this quickly. One of the things that's really important to think about here is that one of the first things we said was we don't want to fall into the trap of defining Kingstowne by what we don't do, like have a building that we pay a mortgage on. We want to be defining ourselves by what we do care about and match up this opportunity with that. And one of the things that we saw right away was, again, the idea that by having this kind of permanent home base, there's so much less energy and time put into setting things up every week that energy can be put towards connecting with the community rather than plugging things in and out and moving all the chairs, even though Paul does an amazing job. There's that. And then there's thinking about the idea that this opportunity allows us to live out our belief in partnership every day and every Sunday. Partnering today, for today's service was largely us talking to ourselves. But every Sunday here is an act of partnership with at least one other congregation, and the opportunity to influence and support each other going forward, which we really liked. And it allows us to start to think about what else can we do to be extroverted and connected to the community. That's what they're trying to do, and they want us to help them figure out how to do that better. Just as soon as we start to think about what the preschool is successful enough, it's growing even in their rented space in another location. Yeah. To the point where when they come back to their home base, they're going to have a preschool satellite that they've started and incubated that's going to keep growing. They're not going to pull that out of the Mount Vernon community. It's going to be there too. They're good enough at it that it's happening elsewhere. And then thinking about what it means to connect with Brightview as well right there. These are all new opportunities that we haven't had the kind of thought process around. And then, of course, keeping ourselves out and about with the way that we like to connect would just be that much easier from this standpoint. So it seemed like there was quite a complementary relationship between what their vision is and what ours is, but we complement each other in a way where we kind of fill in each other's gaps, is what it seemed like to us. pretty exciting there.
And then before we move on to the questions, we wanted to make sure that you all knew of 3 things. So, because I think your questions are going to be related to these things. I anticipate some questions there, so maybe I can answer some of those before you even offer them. What are they wanting us to pay? That was my big question, right? So it was the meeting where I sat down with them to see the building plan. I actually wanted to get a gauge. I got a gauge of a couple things in that meeting. He asked me, so what's your average worship attendance at your church? Like, how many kids do you have? That kind of stuff. So that seemed like an opening for me to ask him the same. And I did, and so he let us know that in the winter months of January to February, at that time frame, which I don't know the update now, they were at Mount Vernon worshiping less than 20 on Sundays.
And that was in part, they had many members who said, once we're back at Virginia Hills location, we'll come back to church. But there's many of their members don't actually come to Mount Vernon every Sunday.
They do not. And then he mentioned that in the past they rented to a Hispanic congregation on like Sunday evenings at like 4 p.m. and that they had keys to the building and they could use classrooms during the week and stuff where it wasn't if it didn't compete with what they were doing or like overlap. But they had access to the building. They had storage on site. And they rented space in the afternoon around 4 p.m. And they said that they had that congregation pay $2,500 a month. And so I said, well, let me tell you what we pay currently. We pay something around $2,100 a month. And I said, so you're talking, well, you did that? You offered that to them with no utilities? And they said, yes. I said, are you thinking the same? So this is the extent of that conversation we've had. It's kind of just like batting some brave questions back and forth, no confirmation. But I said, are you thinking the same? Like $2,500 for access to the building, storage, use of the space during the times that we need it, and that's including of utilities. And he said, that's what we're thinking. Yeah, that would be my. If you need to take that to the UMC, I would take that number to them. Yeah, $2,500 a month. So that's a lot of things we do not currently get for only $400 more a month in rent. Now, is that going to be the long-term amount? I don't know. That's what you create. That's why you write leases, and that's why you create leases where you write into it that it's a 3-year contract, or we reassess it after a certain amount of time. But they're going to also have their things that they're going to want to write in. But as of right now, $2,500 a month is what we are expecting, and that's inclusive of utilities. The other thing is they currently worship at 11. And we worship at 10. It will not work in that space at all. So they asked us if we would be willing to worship at 9. I said, I think that's too big of a push. I said, I think that the earliest we could push it is 9:30. And but it's been bold conversations. Just they say, we were thinking you could be at this time, and then I come back and say, I don't think that will work. I think 9:30 is a much more reasonable move for us, and especially because we currently set up and all that stuff, right? A lot of that will go away. So for all those who participate in the early stuff, that's like we will have actually space in a building that we're going to actually on the same sound system that's already set up and all that to do worship team practice earlier that week. It's not in Brett's basement. It would be at the church itself, which means the whole setting up on Sunday mornings and the practice and all of that before church would be much shorter, right? All of that. So I said 9:30, I believed, but that's up to you. That's part of your consideration, because that's me just speaking on your behalf without knowing what you actually would be comfortable with doing. Just knowing that we'll have to budge if we want this relationship. It just will not work if not. And then the last thing is
so this is Baptist Light. I think that it's interesting to kind of talk about this in a couple different ways. So, what does it mean to have a Methodist church in the same facility as a Baptist church? Are there any conflicts there? That's one of the things that I didn't know enough about that. I think one of the things that's important to note right off the bat is the same day that they voted to have a relationship with us over time, they voted to change the name of their church. And they did that, basically they had a lot of discussions themselves, and they decided to take the term Baptist out of the name of their church so that it would be Virginia Hills Church and Learning Center. They are not changing their theology or their practices within their church. And Michelle can talk a little bit more about how that meshes. But number one, the reason that they did that, the short version is they have decided to do that because the term Baptist in their mind had started to become synonymous with things they do not believe in. Mm-hmm. They felt that was very unfortunate to have the name of something that was really important to them and still is to their faith be corrupted in a way in their minds. Mm-hmm. And because of their beliefs in inclusivity, not just in who they have in their church, but who they have be ministers within their church, for many different reasons, they didn't want people making up assumptions about who they were without ever coming to see them. And so they went through probably a pretty painful moment to make that change. Mm-hmm. But they were also simultaneously trying to incorporate the Learning Center idea into their mission and have that be very extroverted as well. The other thing that's really interesting is they have been living at a Methodist church for the better part of a year now, getting to know how that can work together well. So I think we didn't necessarily perceive any conflicts. They have no desire to take the things that they believe in terms of liturgy and in terms of other faith and things that we do and somehow water them down into a common denominator. Mm-hmm. They want us to be us and for them to be them and allow both ideas to coincide under one roof.
Yeah. There's just a couple of the two things I heard them say over and over again as they were like, we're getting rid of Baptists, but then they would just assure all their people. But we still believe in believers' baptism and the priesthood of all believers. Those are two theological terms, but it affects the way they view baptism and communion. And so communion, priesthood of all believers, is anybody can preside over the table, versus an ordained elder has to preside over the table in the Methodist Church. But the priesthood of all believers is the name that you would call that of anybody can do it at any time they want, anywhere. Then the other thing that matters to them is believers' baptism, which is different from our theology of baptism. We believe that in infant baptism. And so that was one of the first things I needed to clarify in this relationship was, I'm a woman, right? That was one of the three. They knew. And then
clarity really wasn't needed.
But as time went on, I realized that their theology on women in ministry is fully open. They just were afraid that I didn't think that of them because they had Baptist associated to them. So there's a little bit of why the Baptist is coming out. They do believe women can be ministers and all of that. So, but I was making sure, I'm a woman, and then that we're going to be baptizing babies in this space, and you need that's cool, right? We're going to baptize babies in that space. We're also going to baptize adults and all of that. And they have a full immersion baptismal font for the purpose of those adult baptisms and those teenage baptisms. They were like, and when I told them we would use it, they were like, I didn't know Methodists did that. I was like, yes, of course. If they're old enough, I'm not going to you don't submerge a baby, but so of course I'll use it. And then, that we baptize babies, and they said they understand it. They understand that's a different theological view, and then also that in our space of worship, the only person who's going to preside at the table would be the ordained minister, or the only person who will do the sacraments. It would be that. As long as they understood that, that's their theology on the ground that's different than ours. Really, beyond that, it's not much different.